Welcome to Media Studies A Level for Educas, Component 2, Section B, Mainstream and Alternative Magazines. And this is a full analysis of Ocalan's Angels, which is an article from Huck magazine. And just a reminder that Huck magazine is, of course, the example of alternative media. It's an independent magazine published by TCO London. And key aspects we might keep in mind about alternative media and this magazine. They tend to challenge stereotypes and challenge dominant representations. They offer diverse representations of a range of things, including gender and ethnicity, age, it could be place, it could be events. They have more creative freedom because of the way they're set up as an organisation. They don't belong to a conglomerate. And this creativity is more important than profit. They will use media conventions in a less formulaic way, and we can see the arrangement of this front cover, the use of headlines, the use of the main cover line, the use of the cover lines along the bottom, means it's less conventional, so conventions are used in a less formulaic way. And of course it's independently owned by TCO London. And a reminder of the audience for Huck magazine, as previously covered in other videos. But just to summarise, we can say that this audience really are quite highly educated, we'd say university educated. They tend to hold professional jobs. They're ABC1, meaning they're quite affluent, and this magazine is quite expensive as well. They are a millennial audience, so 20s to sort of 30s, and they are ethically minded. So part of the values of this audience is to be ethically minded, and they are interested in diverse representations of the world and people within the world. And we can argue that probably they value experiences, the idea of knowing about things, understanding things, traveling to different places and having an adventure more than owning material possessions. Additionally, I think we can think of this audience as being sort of quite liberal. That means tolerant of diverse views and interested in what's going on in the world and the way different people live. And they're also, I think we would say, more sort of left-wing, probably the left of centre. And back to the article, Ocalan's Angels, and this is about a group of female fighters, female soldiers who live in Syria, but they're part of the Kurdish people, and they fight for the interests of the Kurdish people, and they're fighting against IS, Islamic State, which was the case when this magazine was published in 2016. And of course this article has been introduced to the audience through the front cover, and we see the main cover line, female fighters, and also a pull quote: "We live in a world where women are dominated by men. We are here to take control of our own future." Again, sets up and starts to position the audience alongside these, so we're listening to the ideas of these women, this group of women. And again, I think this magazine, it's worth stressing, gives a voice to people who otherwise wouldn't have a voice within the media. So key things we've done previously: analysis of the front image, the headline, the pull quote, and really the focus for today is just to think about this concept of positioning. So positioning is where you placed in a relationship with a publication, and it can sort of require you to do certain things. So I want you to think about this while we're working through this article. So are the audience positioned to accept the preferred reading? So what would be the preferred reading? Or is there a preferred reading? Because they could be positioned to make up their own minds rather than being told what to think. So should the audience really be supportive of this group of women? or should the audience not like them, or is it a bit of both? Are the audience free to decide for themselves? And back to the article that runs over 4 double pages within the magazine, so it's quite a lengthy article. But as we can see, it contains quite a lot of images, and these images are almost documentary style images. They create a sense of realism, a sense of being in a particular place. They're unglamorized, unglorified, and they're showing us what a different place is like. So again, we can link that to the audience of being interested in diverse cultures and diverse areas of the world. So if we take each one of these double pages one by one and just sort of think them through, in terms of, remember the focus, I'll be positioned with this particular sort of group of women. So of course, key things we've got a headline. We know this from analysis we've done before. We've got a byline, so who's the article by, and the photography also has a byline as well. There is a lead in, so this gives us some background and some context to the article, so known as a lead in. And of course, we've got this image here on the left hand side as we look at it of this woman. So again, we were doing our analysis, direct gaze to camera, and that expression on her face, is that confidence? Is she unsure? How should we look at her? How should we think about her? You know, does she look vulnerable? Does she look strong? I think it's quite an ambiguous image. Of course, it's a medium shot. She's wearing combat clothing and carries a weapon. And again, this would be a more of a sort of diverse representation for women compared to mainstream magazines, and of course no makeup. Again, it leads to this sort of different sort of representation of women. Okay, now if we look at the lead in here, we've got this word feminist. Okay, so in eastern Syria, the war against ISIS is being waged by a feminist army. So if we think about that, is the audience likely to be positioned and encouraged by the use of the word feminist here? So remember, this liberal left-wing audience, feminism is about equality, so they are likely to respond to that word, feminist and feminist army, in a positive way. So we would argue that they are being positioned already by this particular word in the lead-in. And while we think of these group of women as feminist, we have to remember that Ocalan is actually a man. He's leader of something called the PKK, which is seen by Turkey as a terrorist organisation, and it's it's a Turkish group. Now they are actually fighting for him, so Ocalan's angels, they can seem to belong to him. However, Ocalan, before he was sent to jail, set up female fighters in groups and began to empower women and see women in different roles than they had previously been involved with. And at the beginning of this article, we get the story of the fighters returning from a battle, and somebody called Sheikh Derek, one of the thousands of female fighters who stand at the forefront of the battle against the Islamic State. So this 17-year-old girl died in the fighting in a battle in a place called Kobane. And it starts off by writing about her and telling us something about her. And the image that we see is of this scarf, is the scarf that belonged to her as well. So that's a sort of memorial to her and reminds us of her. So this is a journalistic technique where we've got a personalisation. So rather than just tell us about the group, we've got telling us about one person, a 17-year-old, a female who's been fighting, and that might make her sound vulnerable. So this personalisation technique actually positions the audience with this group and with one person in this group in particular. Otherwise, if you're just talking about a group of people, it can seem quite cold, and we might not be that bothered about who they are or what they do. And just towards the end of this article as well, we see the point of view from these women as well, and it refers to them as warriors. That makes them sound quite heroic, and this is a change in the life they've had. When they were younger, they were told by the other government who in Syria that politics was no place or no girl's business, and that they should stay away from it. And they had very sort of set roles domestically, looking after children, things like that. But now in this war that they're involved in Syria, they have taken to the fight, and they are now warriors. So again, we can see they've had a change in circumstance. And as we work through this article, again, we will experience some quite brutal, quite aggressive acts. And of course, we've got a pull quote here. I wanted to let them all know their worst nightmare had come true. So this is referring to the women who capture a group of men, IS fighters, and they line them up and shoot them one by one. And these men are pleading not to be killed by a woman because they would see it as being sort of shameful, but the women actually sort of kill them as well. So again, this act of brutality, this act of violence, this act of war is seen as something that's quite diverse and not usually associated with women. However, it's not all one way, because we do get the viewpoint of the families of some of these girls as well. And there is reference to them almost being like part of a cult. And we can see here there's one mother talks about these girls being sort of brainwashed by the ideas and the ideology of this group to go out and fight. So again, it's not straightforward. So this might position us against the idea that this group have got, that it's a good thing that they go out and fight for their rights and so on, because there's a lot of sort of suffering here. There's a lot of martyrdom. Again, we see the grave of a fighter here. So again, the fighters have become martyrs. They become victims of this cause. So it's not, just glorified heroism. There's suffering here, there's victims here as well. So how does that make us think as the reader? And at the end of this article, we may also think about the summary to it, and it's unclear. I would say it's ambiguous. So the girl who it starts to talk about at the beginning, this 17-year-old who was killed in a battle, it refers to her sister, and where all these people are now celebrating and celebrating the death of the martyrs. They call themselves martyrs, who've shed blood. So if you're a martyr, you've died for a cause that is seen to be worth dying for. But is that the case here? Her sister of one of these martyrs, so-called martyrs, reflects on it, but she isn't celebrating, she's just thinking about it. Regine is her sister, and she leaves the trailer where they've been celebrating and singing sort of heroic songs, but leaves the trailer lost deep in thought, thinking about her sister, thinking about, is this right? Is this a sacrifice worth making? So again, that's quite ambiguous, it's quite open. So again, the article as a whole, does it position the audience? We might think about even the word angels, angelic, people to be admired, people to be seen as being sort of holy, having value. So again, that's perhaps part of the positioning of us as an audience as well. But again, Ocalan is a man, so they're fighting for somebody else, they're fighting for a man, they're belonging to a male, so does that make it more complicated in terms of how we read and understand this article? That's what we've got to think about. And I'm going to ask you just to reflect on this and do 2 or 3 questions. How is the audience positioned with the women of the WPJ, or the Women's Defence Unit, translates to in English when they're fighting in Syria? Do we like them? Do we see them as heroic? Or is it against this? This is not a good idea. Are they victims? Why, are they being brainwashed? Are they a cult? What sort of things? On how might we be positioned against them? We've got to have a think about that. Okay, so we can reflect on this article and think about those things and feel that we know this article, then that will be worthwhile. Thank you.